Hey, so now we're going to talk about Chapter 13, and this is where it talks about your legal memorandum that you will have due at the end of the semester. This week, you're going to have likely an outline due where you will outline your memorandum, and I want you to look at the book reference examples on 303, page 303, and page 305. They give good examples of outlines, but let's talk about each part of the memorandum first. Facts. You only want the relevant facts. You want concise facts. So, for example, if the defendant, let's say it's a criminal case, you're doing a criminal legal memorandum, and the defendant is a felon, okay? It's not going to be relevant if it's a wire fraud case, but it is going to be relevant if it is a felon in possession case. In other words, if your partner defense or your partner attorney is asking you to do a memo on whether your client can possess a firearm. Okay. Well, if he's a felon, then that will obviously be relevant because felons cannot possess firearms. But if it's a wire fraud case, did my client commit wire fraud? It will not be relevant whether he was a felon or not. So, again, just make sure that you have the relevant facts in there. Don't leave out an important fact, but also don't overload it with facts and get it drowned out, because otherwise it'll be too distracting. So issue statement, you're going to refer back to page 26 in your text. That will help you write the issue statement. But essentially, the book does a good job of teaching you how to break it down, but really break down the issue. You're breaking down that issue. You're not, may not be a broad of was a crime committed. You may need to answer the question of, if he possessed the gun in the car and he was by himself and it was under his seat, would he be guilty? So, see what I'm saying? That'd be that's a lot more specific issue, and it really points to the issue. Issue spotting is one of the most important things in the legal profession. You really need to be able to spot that issue of what's important. So, moving on to the discussion section, this is the meat, right? This is where it all happens. So make sure you have good topic sentences. You want to first talk about what law is or what authority is involved. If it's a statute or a code, then you're going to talk about each element here. If it's basically a case law, then you're going to break down the case, the facts of that case, the ruling, the holding of that case. Don't get too bogged down on those facts, but mainly the holding. And then what you're going to do is you're going to compare your facts to the law, right? We talked about that a good bit. So, for example, a statutory law, you will go through each element of that statute or code and whether your facts apply. In other words, whether, let's say it's a negligence case, and whether, duty, breach of duty, causation, and damages, whether each one of those is found. Or criminal, same deal. If you have certain elements of each crime, you will make sure each one of those is met before you can say that a crime was committed. Case law, you're going to want to, like I said, put the facts in the holding, and then you're going to compare your facts to the facts of that case, and compare and contrast. Talk about the similarities and the differences between those two, so you can really analyze, discuss those cases and comparing the law to your case. So, and then let me mention one more thing. Don't overquote stuff, okay? I like block quoting some things, and I like quoting things, but my eyes start glazing over, and everybody's eyes glaze over if there's too many quotes in there. So really, it needs to be in your own words, right? If there's a really good quote from a court or maybe a statute, you probably don't want to quote the statute. If there's a statute, you will want to quote that. So, and then you want to end the discussion with any counter arguments. So if you think the defense is going to argue something, or the other side is going to argue something against your position, go ahead and put that in there at the end. And you want to talk about that at the end of that, okay? And then obviously it speaks for itself. The conclusion is where you kind of wrap it up and close it out and give your conclusion there. So if anybody has any questions about this outline, feel free to contact me. But essentially, it's important to outline anything you do. Get your thoughts in order. It'll really give you a roadmap of where you're going. Again, page 303 and 305, they do a really good job of explaining how to make an outline. And so taking all those things that I just talked about, you're just going to concisely make an outline for this assignment. Again, email me if you have any questions. Thank you.